The sounds of sirens pierce the silence. A red glow on the horizon tears through the sky, turning the night into fire. Megacities, once shining with millions of lights, now descend into chaos, buildings collapse, bridges melt, and people frantically search for even a shadow of salvation. This is not a scene from a movie but a possible reality if nuclear war breaks out. The world as we know it could vanish in just a few hours. One wrong command, one launch, and the civilization we have built over millennia would turn to ash. Imagine cities becoming deserts, the air poisoned, and the sun a faint blot behind a veil of nuclear dust. But even in this hell, there are countries that could survive. Islands of stability in an ocean of chaos. Nations for which the end of the world is not the end, but a trial they are capable of enduring. Why them? How can one survive when the entire world perishes? What makes these countries special? Geography, economy, resources, or something more? Today, we won't just talk about the possible future. Step by step, we will uncover why some nations may not only survive a nuclear catastrophe but also become the cradle of a new humanity. On the screen, a contrast: the ruins of a metropolis shrouded in smoke give way to green valleys and pristine lakes. Places where tranquility reigns, where time seems to have stopped. These places exist, and they might hold the key to survival. So, which countries will endure the blow when the world collapses? And most importantly, what can we learn from them before it's too late? There are currently 9 countries on the planet that possess nuclear weapons. 9 against almost 200 defenseless ones. And if one day even part of these arsenals is used, the consequences will not stop at borders, they will affect everyone. According to scientists at Princeton University, a full-scale nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia could kill up to 90 million people in the first hours. Billions would die later from cold, hunger, and radiation. But here's the paradox: even in the face of total destruction, some countries would still have a chance to survive. The question is, which ones? And why does fate favor them more than others? The secret lies not in weapons, military power, or the number of allies. The real advantage is in how capable a country is of existing autonomously, without the outside world. Scientists refer to this as self-sufficiency, when a state can provide itself with everything it needs: food, energy, water, and security, even if the rest of the planet is engulfed in flames. And this is where unexpected names come to the forefront. Countries that do not seek global dominance, do not participate in military games, but quietly, for decades, build resilient systems capable of withstanding any crisis. While some accumulate nuclear warheads, others accumulate resources, food, and independence. This is the first key to survival, and it will determine who survives the first day of a nuclear apocalypse, and who disappears forever. When scientists began modeling potential nuclear winter scenarios, they discovered that humanity still has green islands of hope. The focus is on New Zealand and Australia. 2 countries far removed from the world's centers of conflict and possessing what the rest of the world will lack: land, water, and a stable climate. If the majority of countries face hunger and logistical collapse in the first weeks after an exchange of strikes, there is a chance to hold out here. Why? Because both countries have spent decades developing agriculture not for export, but for self-sufficiency. Australia is one of the largest producers of wheat, barley, beef, and milk in the world. New Zealand is a country where there is more than 1 hectare of arable land per capita, and its freshwater reserves are among the most abundant on the planet. Even if global trade comes to a halt, these 2 territories are capable of feeding their populations without external supplies. But their strength is not just in food. Their geographical location makes them natural refuges. They are far from likely targets, surrounded by the ocean, which means radioactive fallout would reach them last and in a weakened form. In 2022, scientists from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology modeled potential survival zones in the event of a global conflict. New Zealand ranked first in the refuge countries rating. It has a developed renewable energy sector, sustainable agriculture, and a low population density. This means that even in the face of a global catastrophe, it would be possible to grow crops, generate electricity, and maintain order here. While the rest of the world plunges into darkness, these lands could become a stronghold for a new beginning. But a new question arises. If even these countries face the threat of climate collapse, will they be able to maintain their advantage? The answer to this question leads us to the next, far more troubling part of the story. But even for those who survive the initial hours, a trial more terrifying than the explosion itself may lie ahead. Scientists call it nuclear winter. When hundreds of megatons of dust and soot rise into the atmosphere, they block out the sun, turning day into eternal twilight. Surface temperatures drop by 10, 15, and in some places, even 20 degrees. The world slowly cools, crops fail, seas freeze. This is not just destruction, it is a global extinction caused by cold and starvation. In 2022, a study by Rutgers University revealed that even a limited conflict between India and Pakistan, involving only 1/100th of the global nuclear arsenal, would lead to a drop in global temperatures by 1.5 to 2 degrees. A full-scale war between the US and Russia would result in temperature drops of up to 15 degrees and the death of more than 75% of the planet's population within a few years. New Zealand and Australia might seem far from the centers of devastation, but nuclear winter knows no borders. Even there, the sun will dim and crops will begin to die under an ashen sky. However, there is one caveat: both countries possess stable reserves and a climatic advantage. The southern hemisphere will suffer less, air currents will distribute the ash unevenly, and some southern regions will remain habitable. Nevertheless, even in these corners of the world, food will become currency, and every sack of grain will be as valuable as gold. Reserves that today seem excessive will become a matter of survival. Those with enough food, energy, and stability will endure the blow. Those without will vanish into the shadow of chaos. This is the moment where fear intertwines with respect for those who were prepared. Countries that have spent decades building strategic reserves and autonomous infrastructure will suddenly become the only ones capable of sustaining life. Perhaps this is what sets survivors apart from the doomed: not strength, not technology, but the willingness to embrace the impossible. And if New Zealand and Australia have become symbols of natural resilience, then the next country will demonstrate how survival turns into an art, deliberate, cold, and engineeringly precise. While New Zealand and Australia rely on nature and geography, there is a country that has placed its bet on preparation. Switzerland. A small nation in the heart of Europe, which has not participated in wars for more than 200 years, yet is better prepared for them than anyone else. Since the end of World War II, Switzerland has lived by the motto, neutrality does not mean complacency. In the 1960s, it began building a civil defense system unparalleled anywhere in the world. Today, the country has more than 9 million shelters, enough to accommodate the entire population. Every house, every new building is required by law to have a bomb shelter. This is not a recommendation but a legal obligation. If disaster strikes, a Swiss citizen knows where to take refuge. And they will have everything they need: ventilation, water supplies, medication, and food for weeks. But Switzerland is prepared not only for the initial impact but also for the aftermath. In case of a global crisis, the country maintains state food reserves, warehouses stocked with grain, sugar, rice, oil, and coffee. These reserves are capable of sustaining the entire population for several months, even if imports are completely halted. Moreover, these are not outdated leftovers. The supplies are regularly refreshed, inspected, and replenished. The country's financial system, decentralized energy sector, and developed infrastructure, all of this paints a picture of a state capable of functioning autonomously. Even with closed borders and destroyed communications, Switzerland will remain capable of providing itself with basic resources. And here arises a sense of admiration. In a world where most countries ignore the possibility of disaster, Switzerland treats it as an engineering problem that simply needs to be solved in advance. This is not panic but cold calculation. And perhaps it is this very calculation that may one day save millions of lives. Against the backdrop of images of ruined megacities, its alpine valleys appear almost unreal, green, quiet, stable. As if this country exists in a different time, where the future has already been calculated and fear has been conquered by rationality. But it is at this moment that the viewer must ask themselves the question: if the most protected are preparing for the worst, what are the others doing? And why is it that those with power and resources turn out to be the most vulnerable? The paradox lies in the fact that the strongest countries may turn out to be the most vulnerable. The USA, Russia, and China, nations the world has come to view as symbols of power, could become the first victims of their own might in the event of a nuclear conflict. The irony of fate is that what was meant to protect could end up being the cause of destruction. Military infrastructure, population density, megacities concentrated near strategic sites, all of this makes them ideal targets. The first strike always hits those capable of retaliating. This is precisely why megacities like New York, Washington, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Beijing, and Shanghai would be the first to disappear. millions of lives, within mere minutes. But the destruction of buildings is only the beginning. Far more terrifying is what comes afterward, the breakdown of social connections, the collapse of infrastructure, anarchy. In a country where everything depends on centralized systems, energy, transportation, finance, the destruction of even one link triggers the collapse of the entire system. Imagine no electricity, no internet, no fuel supply. A city ceases to be a city and turns into a trap. Weapons that were created for deterrence now become the catalyst for collapse. This is where the moral dilemma arises. What is power if it cannot protect its own people? Are the billions invested in arsenals worth it if they ultimately destroy everything they were designed to defend? And who will prove stronger, the one who knows how to destroy, or the one who knows how to survive? History has already given us hints. During the Cold War, American analysts calculated the scenario of mutual assured destruction. They knew there would be no winners. But even then, few thought about how to live afterward. Russia, the United States, China, and other powers today continue to build up nuclear stockpiles, forgetting that winning a nuclear war is impossible. One can only survive it, and even then, only if prepared in advance for what follows the first explosion. At this moment, it becomes clear, military power is an illusion of security. True strength lies in the ability to preserve life, not to destroy it. And the further this thought unfolds, the clearer the contrast becomes between the noise of nuclear powers and the silence of countries simply preparing to survive. The world stands on the threshold where the traditional understanding of strength loses its meaning. The strong one is not the one who presses the button, but the one who survives when it is pressed. And it is this thought that becomes a bridge to the next part, a reflection on what truly determines the chance of survival. When the dust settles and the sky gradually returns its light, it becomes evident, not every country that survives the strike will be able to continue living. Survival is not merely the absence of destruction. It is the ability to maintain order, meaning, and structure when the world around collapses. Analysts studying post-catastrophe scenarios identify three main criteria that determine which states will be able to withstand chaos: geography, resources, and political stability. The first factor is geography. The farther a country is from potential targets, the higher its chances. Island and mountainous states gain natural protection. Oceans and mountain ranges act as shields, containing radiation and airflows. This is why countries like New Zealand, Iceland, Switzerland, and Norway find themselves in a special position. Their location is not just a coincidence but a natural barrier against chaos. The second factor is resources. Energy, water, and food are the three pillars on which survival rests. Those who depend on imports are doomed to fall first. Meanwhile, those who can extract, produce, and distribute everything domestically have a chance to build a new economy on the ruins of the old one. For example, Iceland, with its geothermal energy, can supply itself with electricity even without external assistance. Norway, with its reserves of oil, gas, and hydropower, as well as a well-thought-out reserve system. These resources become not just a source of strength but a tool for survival. The third factor is political and social stability. A world where communications and governments are destroyed does not need weapons but trust. Countries with a high level of social cohesion and trust among people will be able to adapt more quickly. Where people are accustomed to order, discipline, and collective decisions, chaos cannot fully prevail. This is precisely why countries like Switzerland or Sweden are considered by experts as potential centers for recovery after a catastrophe. But survival is not just a set of characteristics. It is a choice made long before the catastrophe. Every state is already determining its fate. Some live for today, while others plan for the future in case of the worst. And it is at this very moment that the viewer feels the transition. After a series of facts and alarming conclusions, something greater emerges, a sense of hope. Yes, humanity can destroy itself, but it can also survive. Because behind the dry numbers and geopolitics lies something immeasurable, the human factor. This is where the story takes a turn. All the facts, all the data, merely a prelude to the main revelation. It's not weapons, walls, or resources that save us. It's the ability of people to unite, to trust, to help, and to rebuild. This realization becomes the bridge to the climax. The moment when we see for the first time, the key to humanity's survival lies within humanity itself. Everything we've seen before, explosions, destruction, cold numbers, is just the backdrop. The real story begins where the people remain. When nuclear winter envelopes the planet, when technology becomes useless and cities disappear, it is not the one with the most resources who survives, but the one with the most humanity. History shows, in critical moments, it is not the strongest who prevail, but those who know how to unite. After World War II, when Europe lay in ruins, it was the cooperation of nations that allowed the continent to recover. When Iceland was cut off from the world in the 2010s due to the eruption of the age-geological volcano, people did not succumb to panic. They organized, shared food, and supported their neighbors. When the earthquake and tsunami struck Japan in 2011, thousands of people stood in line for water and food, calmly, without chaos. This is the human factor, the greatest weapon of survival. Scientists from Oxford and Harvard agree, countries with high levels of trust within society and among citizens are significantly more likely to recover from global catastrophes. Because survival is not just about biology. It is a culture of cooperation. Imagine a world after a nuclear war. Hundreds of millions have perished, nations lie in ruins. And somewhere, amidst the gray ashes, the surviving countries begin to unite, not for power, but for the preservation of life. The Swiss share their autonomous energy technologies. New Zealanders send seeds and food supplies. Icelanders help restore communication and power grids. Thus, a new network of survivors is born, where the arms race is replaced by a race for recovery. This is where the turning point occurs, the revelation that changes the viewer's perspective. It turns out that humanity can save itself not through bunkers, not through weapons, not through stockpiles, but through itself. When fear gives way to cooperation, even the darkest times lose their grip. We are used to thinking that a catastrophe is the end. But perhaps it will become the beginning of something new. A world built on trust, not fear. On knowledge, not ideology. On humanity, not weapons. And at this moment, the viewer realizes the entire story was not about who will survive, but about what humanity will do with this chance. We have passed through ashes and cold, witnessed the destruction of metropolises and the silence of continents. But at the end of the road, one simple thought remains: humanity still has a chance. We have learned which countries might survive: New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland, Iceland, Norway. But perhaps the main conclusion is not about geography or economics. True survival begins within a person. Where there is the ability to cooperate, to help one another, to trust, life will always find a way. History has proven this time and time again. After Chernobyl, after Hiroshima, after global epidemics, humanity returned, not because it was ready, but because it could not do otherwise. And in this lies our strength. We fear the end of the world, yet we forget that within each of us is the ability to build anew. Today, when we talk about the nuclear threat, we are, in fact, talking about choice. About whether we will continue to create weapons or begin to create a future. Every nation, every person is now deciding to become a source of destruction or a pillar of support for others. Even if the world collapses one day, meaning will not disappear as long as there are those who can care, who preserve knowledge, who are ready to unite. The chances of survival are not a formula or a calculation. It is a matter of who we choose to be when everything else is gone. Imagine the final scenes. In the place of destroyed cities, sprouts of greenery. In the place of walls, people building a new home together. The silence after the storm does not frighten, it gives hope. And here comes the final question addressed to every viewer. If everything disappears tomorrow, what will remain within you? Fear or humanity? Ashes or a sprout? We are used to thinking that the end of the world is the finale. But perhaps it is simply the moment when we finally understand who we are. And if history teaches us anything, it is that survival is not enough. What matters is who you become afterward.